Late one evening, in a quiet American town, a retired man stood behind the counter of a small convenience store and began printing lottery tickets. Not a few tickets, not the hopeful handful most people buy while imagining a lucky break. Hundreds, then thousands. The machine kept spitting them out while the pile slowly grew on the counter. To anyone watching, it would have looked like madness. Why would a retired store owner spend several $1,000s on lottery tickets? But the strange part is this: he was not gambling, he was executing a strategy. Before going further, there is a question that still divides people who hear this story. Was what he did genius or unethical? Did he exploit the system, or simply understand it better than the people who designed it? The man's name was Jerry. He was not a professional gambler, not a mathematician working in a university research lab, not a hacker, and not a financial trader. For decades, he ran a small convenience store, the kind of place where locals bought coffee in the morning and scratched lottery tickets in the afternoon. For most of his life, the lottery was just another product behind the counter. But one day, Jerry did something that almost no one bothers to do. He read the rules. The game was a state lottery called Winfall. At first glance, it looked exactly like every other lottery in the country. Players chose a set of numbers and hoped they matched the draw. If nobody matched the full set, the jackpot continued to grow for the next round. Most players stopped thinking about it there. Jerry did not, because buried deep inside the official rulebook was a small clause, a mechanism designed to keep the game exciting, even when jackpots grew too large. That mechanism was called a rolldown. Under normal conditions, when no one wins the jackpot, the prize money simply carries over into the next drawing. The pot grows larger, attracting more players. Winfall worked differently. If the jackpot passed a certain threshold and still no one matched all the numbers, the money would not continue growing. Instead, it would roll down into the lower prize tiers. At first, this rule seemed harmless. In fact, it looked like a feature designed to keep players interested. But when Jerry examined it carefully, something unusual appeared. He sat down with a calculator and began running the numbers. And eventually, he noticed something that should not exist in a lottery system. In almost every lottery, the expected value of a ticket is negative. The system is designed that way. Over time, players collectively lose money while the operator earns revenue. But during certain roll-down draws in Winfall, the structure of the prizes changed dramatically. When the jackpot reached a particular level and the money rolled down, the payouts for smaller winning combinations increased. And under those conditions, something mathematically unusual happened. The expected value of a ticket could become positive. In practical terms, that meant that a player buying enough tickets could statistically win more money than they spent. That situation should not exist in a properly balanced lottery. But in this case, it did. And that realization changed everything. The system itself was not broken. It was simply misunderstood. There was one obvious obstacle. Mathematics only works over large samples. Buying a handful of tickets would change nothing. Even buying a few dozen would still leave the player exposed to randomness. To make the statistical advantage meaningful, thousands of tickets were required, and that meant risking real money. Jerry decided to test the theory. He invested several $1,000s of his own savings and waited for a roll-down drawing. When the moment arrived, he purchased a large batch of tickets. Later that evening, he sat at his kitchen table surrounded by stacks of printed slips. One by one, he checked them. Slowly, the results revealed a clear pattern. The math worked. He had spent thousands of dollars on tickets, and the winnings exceeded the cost. That was the moment the idea stopped being a theory. It became a system. Jerry immediately recognized another challenge. To make the strategy consistently profitable, he needed more capital than he personally had. So he did something unusual. He created a small investment group. Friends, neighbors, and local farmers joined the effort. People who trusted him and were willing to contribute money to the experiment. They pooled their funds. Jerry managed the ticket purchases. What began as a simple idea slowly evolved into a structured operation. During each roll-down draw, the group purchased thousands of tickets. Boxes filled with printed slips were transported, sorted, and checked, and the results followed the same pattern again and again. They won. Not a single massive jackpot, but steady returns, small prizes, medium prizes, occasionally larger ones. Individually, the tickets looked insignificant. Collectively, they produced consistent profit. This continued year after year. Think about the scale of that situation. A state lottery system slowly losing millions of dollars to a group of retirees from a quiet town. And for a long time, nobody stopped them. The reason was simple. They had not broken any rules. They were not hacking the system. They were not manipulating the drawing process. They were simply buying tickets according to the official rules of the game. Eventually, however, something changed. Another group discovered the same mathematical flaw. A team of university students studying mathematics identified the roll-down advantage and began applying a similar strategy. Now, there were two independent groups exploiting the same weakness in the system. What had been a quiet opportunity became an invisible competition. Both groups were purchasing large quantities of tickets during the same draws. Both relied on the same statistical logic, and both extracted money from the lottery system. Ticket machines printed endlessly, stacks of lottery slips filled convenience stores. Large sums of money moved between towns and across state lines. Eventually, the lottery administrators began noticing a pattern. Certain players were winning unusually often. Investigators started examining the situation. But the deeper they looked, the more complicated the problem became. Because technically, nothing illegal had occurred. The players had simply participated in the lottery, exactly as the rules allowed. This created a difficult situation for the authorities. Accusing the players of fraud would require proving that purchasing tickets was somehow illegal. It was not. Yet ignoring the pattern meant accepting continuous financial losses. For a period of time, the system continued operating while officials tried to understand what had happened. Meanwhile, Jerry and his group continued using the same strategy. For nearly a decade, almost 10 years of systematic advantage. Millions of dollars quietly extracted from a lottery designed to collect money from players, all because one person had taken the time to read the rules carefully. Eventually, the situation reached a turning point. Journalists began asking questions, investigators reviewed the structure of the game, and finally the state authorities recognized the underlying flaw. By that time, however, the strategy had already run its course. The players had not broken the system. They had simply used it exactly as written. The only practical solution was to change the rules. The Winfall lottery was quietly discontinued. The roll-down mechanism disappeared, and the mathematical advantage vanished overnight. There were no arrests, no criminal charges, just the end of the game. By that point, Jerry and his partners had already earned millions. But the real lesson of the story has very little to do with money. Sometimes the greatest weakness inside a system is not corruption, it is not hacking, it is not fraud. Sometimes the weakness is simply the rules themselves, which leads back to the question that started this story. Did Jerry defeat the system? Or did the system fail to understand its own mathematics? Because the most dangerous player in any game is rarely the luckiest one. It is the person who reads the rules and understands what they truly mean.